Fear is not born in the moment of danger. It is born earlier, quietly, when the mind imagines what might happen. By the time fear appears, the battle is already lost. The samurai understood this with terrifying clarity. They did not wait to feel fear and then react. They trained their minds to move before fear could form. Not faster reflexes, not stronger bodies, but anticipation so deep that fear never had time to exist. Most people live the opposite way. They wait for fear to arrive. Then they try to calm themselves. They try to think positively. They try to breathe. By then, their nervous system is already hijacked. A samurai prepared before the arrow was released, before the door opened, before the voice was raised. They rehearsed danger in silence, again and again, until the unknown lost its power. This is not courage. Courage still feels fear. This is something colder, quieter, and far more reliable. When you learn anticipation the way a samurai did, fear stops being an enemy. It becomes irrelevant. And once you see how early fear actually begins, you realize how much control you have always had. Chapter 1. The awakening fear always arrives the same way. Not as panic, not as terror, but as a small tightening in the chest. A pause before action. A moment where the body waits for permission from the mind. This is where most lives quietly shrink. The samurai noticed this moment early in their training. They saw how hesitation was not weakness, but timing. Fear was never about danger itself. It was about unfamiliarity, the gap between what the mind expected and what reality delivered. A young warrior would feel it before his first duel. Not when the sword was drawn, but the night before. Lying awake, imagining outcomes, losing face, losing life, losing control. Nothing had happened yet, but the body was already responding as if it had. This is the awakening most people never have. Fear is rehearsed long before it is experienced. Modern life hides this truth well. You feel fear before a conversation, before pressing send, before walking into a room, before beginning the work that could change everything. The body tightens, breathing shortens, thoughts scatter. You assume fear has arrived. In reality, it has been warming up for hours, days, sometimes years. Here the samurai made a crucial distinction. They did not ask how to be brave in the moment. They asked why the moment still felt unfamiliar. This single shift changed everything. A samurai did not wait for life to surprise him. He studied the terrain before walking it. He visualized conflict before it appeared. He trained responses until the body no longer needed instruction. Fear feeds on novelty. Remove novelty, and fear starves. Halfway through training, something subtle happens. The warrior stops imagining victory or defeat. He starts recognizing patterns. The raised shoulder before an attack, the breath before a strike, the silence before violence. Anticipation replaces anxiety. What once felt threatening becomes expected. What was expected becomes neutral. And what is neutral no longer triggers fear. Most people believe fear is emotional. The samurai understood it as informational. Fear is the signal that something has not been seen enough times. Once this truth settles in, a door quietly opens. If fear is born from the unknown, then the path forward is not confidence, it is familiarity. The awakening is not dramatic, it is calm, almost disappointing. You realize fear has never been stronger than you. It has only been earlier. Chapter 2. The Ancient Principle. The samurai did not call it fearlessness, they called it seeing ahead. In their training halls, long before a blade was ever lifted, there was an exercise that looked almost passive. The warrior would sit in silence and mentally walk through danger. Not once. Hundreds of times, they imagined ambushes on narrow roads, an insult spoken in public, a hand reaching too quickly toward a sword, rain, darkness, uneven ground. Nothing dramatic happened in the room, but something irreversible happened in the mind. This practice came from a principle older than the samurai themselves. The mind cannot panic about what it recognizes as familiar. Fear requires surprise. Zen monks describe this as emptying the unknown before it arrives. Modern neuroscience would later confirm the same mechanism. The brain reacts violently to unpredictability, not threat. Predictable danger produces focus. Unpredictable danger produces fear. This is why soldiers fear the first battle more than the 10th. Why the first confrontation feels unbearable, and the next feels manageable. The body learns patterns faster than the mind admits. The samurai turned this into doctrine. They did not visualize success, they visualized reality. Pain, mistakes, blood, fatigue, disorientation. They rehearsed imperfection until it lost emotional charge. At first, the body resisted, the heart rate rose, the breath shortened. The imagination triggered stress. Then something shifted. The same images stopped producing reaction. The nervous system learned there was nothing new here. This is where anticipation becomes power. Halfway through this discipline, many warriors noticed something unsettling. They were calmer in imagined danger than in daily life. This quiet realization changes how you see your own fear. If imagined danger can be neutralized, what does that say about the fears you carry now? The samurai understood that courage born in the moment is fragile. Anticipation built over time is unbreakable. By the time conflict arrived, the body had already been there. Muscles responded without consultation. Breathing stayed deep. Vision stayed wide. Fear did not disappear. It failed to appear. The ancient principle is simple, but uncomfortable. You do not eliminate fear by avoiding it. You eliminate fear by meeting it early, repeatedly, and without drama. Most people wait for fear to announce itself. The samurai went looking for it first. Once the unknown is stripped of mystery, the mind has nothing left to protect. And when the mind stops protecting, the body moves freely. Chapter 3. The Internal War. When fear finally appears, it feels sudden, but inside the body, the war has already begun. The samurai understood that fear is not a thought, it is a biological takeover. Before the mind can reason, the nervous system decides. Heart rate accelerates, vision narrows, muscles tense for escape or attack. This is not weakness, it is ancient survival intelligence. The problem is timing. Fear was designed for ambushes and predators, not for conversations, decisions, or modern pressure. Yet the body responds the same way. The samurai trained to intercept this process before it crossed the point of no return. They observed that fear always follows a sequence. First, uncertainty. Then, interpretation. Then, physical reaction. Once the body reacts, the mind becomes a servant. This is why telling yourself to calm down never works. By the time the thought appears, control is already lost. Anticipation disrupts the sequence at the source. When a situation has been rehearsed, uncertainty collapses. When uncertainty collapses, interpretation weakens. When interpretation weakens, the body stays regulated. This is the real internal war, not between courage and fear, but between preparation and surprise. Modern neuroscience confirms what the samurai lived by instinct. The amygdala reacts to novelty faster than the conscious mind can respond, but repeated exposure trains the prefrontal cortex to stay online. In simple terms, familiarity keeps you human. Surprise turns you into instinct. There is a quiet moment during this training where resistance appears. The mind begins to avoid rehearsal. It says this is unnecessary, uncomfortable, excessive. This is the nervous system protecting old patterns. Those who push through this phase notice a change that is difficult to describe. The body stops bracing for impact. Breathing deepens on its own. Awareness widens instead of collapsing. Danger feels slower. Not because the world has changed, but because the internal war is no longer being fought in real time. The samurai did not suppress fear. They prevented its ignition. When anticipation is complete, fear has nowhere to land. No mystery, no shock, only movement. And in that state, action becomes clean, deliberate, and quiet. Chapter 4. The system, anticipation without structure, collapses under pressure. The samurai knew this, so they did not rely on insight alone. They built systems that removed choice before fear could interfere. A warrior never asked what to do in danger. The answer already existed. Training followed strict patterns, same movements, same order, same rhythm. Not because creativity was forbidden, but because predictability calmed the nervous system. When the body knows what comes next, it does not panic. This was the hidden system behind samurai anticipation. They reduced life into rehearsed sequences. If approached, step here. If struck, move there. If surrounded, breathe first, then act. No improvisation under stress. Improvisation comes after mastery. Modern psychology describes this as decision elimination. Every decision costs energy. Under threat, energy drains fast. The samurai removed decisions before they mattered. This is why their training looked repetitive, even obsessive. The same draw of the sword thousands of times, the same stance held until the legs shook. They were not strengthening muscles, they were teaching the body certainty. There is a moment in this system that most people resist. It feels rigid, too controlled, almost lifeless. But this resistance reveals something important. Your fear feeds on choice. Choice invites doubt. Doubt invites hesitation. The samurai chose once, long before the moment arrived. They decided how to stand, how to breathe, how to respond. Then they repeated until the body stopped asking questions. A quiet transition happens here. What once required discipline becomes default. The breath settles automatically. The posture appears without effort. Attention moves outward instead of inward. This is where anticipation becomes embodied. You are no longer preparing mentally. You are prepared physically. Fear tries to enter through confusion, through chaos, through indecision. The system blocks all three. When danger finally arrives, it feels strangely late. The body is already moving. The mind is already clear. The samurai did not trust courage. They trusted systems, and systems, once built correctly, do not panic. Chapter 5. Practice without gaps. The samurai feared one thing more than failure: interruption. They understood that anticipation decays the moment practice breaks. Not slowly, immediately. A single gap invites uncertainty back in, and uncertainty is where fear rebuilds itself. This is why their training was relentless, but not dramatic. They did not aim for perfect sessions, they aimed for unbroken ones. A wounded warrior still practiced. A tired warrior still practiced. A distracted warrior still practiced, not at full intensity, but without absence. This distinction matters. Most people train only when conditions feel right. Energy is high, confidence is present, time is available. The samurai trained when conditions were wrong, because fear does not wait for ideal circumstances. Practice without gaps teaches the nervous system a deeper lesson. Action continues, regardless of internal state. This is how anticipation becomes stable. If training stops when motivation fades, the body learns a dangerous rule. That discomfort is a signal to pause. Fear uses the same signal. The samurai broke this association early. On days of exhaustion, practice became slower, shorter, quieter, but it never disappeared. This continuity trained trust. The body learned that no matter what arose internally, movement followed. There is a subtle transformation that happens here. You stop measuring progress by intensity. You start measuring it by presence. The body becomes familiar with showing up incomplete, uncertain, uninspired, and nothing collapses. This is critical. Fear grows strongest when you believe performance must be perfect. When mistakes feel dangerous, when hesitation feels final. Practice without gaps dissolves this illusion. Errors are absorbed. Fatigue is included. Discomfort becomes ordinary. Anticipation no longer relies on ideal rehearsals. It becomes flexible. The samurai could adapt not because they improvised well, but because their practice had already included disruption. rain, noise, fatigue, pain. The body recognized these states as known territory. This is why fear had little leverage. When a real threat appeared, it felt like another imperfect session, not a breaking point. Most people believe consistency is about discipline. The samurai knew it was about identity. You do not stop because you are afraid. You stop when stopping feels normal. They made continuation normal, and in doing so, they removed the conditions fear needs to survive. Chapter 6. Pre-solutions. Fear gains its sharpest edge from one source, the unexpected. The samurai did not try to react faster than surprise. They erased surprise entirely. Before conflict ever appeared, they asked a quiet question. What could go wrong? Then they answered it in advance. This was not pessimism, it was clarity. They listed disruptions the way others list hopes: fatigue, poor footing, multiple attackers, a broken weapon, a sudden noise, a mistake. Each scenario received a response before it ever occurred. If the sword slipped, move here. If the ground gave way, shift weight there. If vision failed, slow breath first. No thinking required in the moment. Modern psychology calls this pre-commitment. The brain performs best when decisions are made in calm states, not stressful ones. The samurai learned this through blood and repetition. When chaos arrived, the body did not search for options. It executed instructions already written into muscle and breath. This is why fear never escalated. Fear feeds on decision pressure. When the mind must choose under threat, it panics. Pre-solutions remove that burden. There is a stage in this practice where discomfort rises. The mind resists imagining failure. It prefers optimism. It avoids rehearsing breakdown. But the samurai knew a hard truth. Avoided scenarios return as shock. Faced scenarios return as memory. Once rehearsed, even failure feels familiar. A weapon breaks. The body has been there before. Balance is lost. The breath already knows how to respond. Nothing feels new. This is the quiet power of pre-solutions. You stop relying on confidence. You rely on preparation. Confidence fluctuates. Preparation holds. Over time, anticipation deepens beyond conscious thought. The body carries answers the mind never needs to access. This is why samurai appeared calm in situations that shattered others. They were not calmer by nature. They were finished deciding. When nothing is left undecided, fear has no entry point. The unknown becomes mapped territory. Chaos becomes sequence. And when every outcome has already been met once, fear arrives with nothing to announce. Only movement remains. Chapter 7. Transformation. There is a moment when fear stops being an event and becomes a memory. Not because life grew safer, but because nothing feels unprepared. The samurai called this state readiness without tension. From the outside, it looked like calm. From the inside, it felt empty. No rushing thoughts, no bracing body, no internal debate. This was not bravery. Bravery still negotiates with fear. This was completion. By the time danger appeared, the mind had nothing left to add. Every path had already been walked. Every failure had already been imagined. Every response had already been practiced. The body moved without announcement. Breath stayed deep. Vision stayed wide. Time felt slower. This is what anticipation ultimately creates. Not aggression, not confidence, neutrality. Fear needs friction to exist. Resistance, uncertainty, surprise. When none of these are present, fear dissolves quietly. The samurai did not feel powerful in these moments. They felt ordinary. And that was the final transformation. What once felt extraordinary became baseline. Calm was no longer something to reach for. It was the starting point. This is why their presence unsettled others. Not because they were intense, but because they were unavailable to panic. In modern life, the same transformation is possible. Meetings, decisions, confrontations, uncertainty. Anticipate them fully, and they lose emotional weight. You stop asking how to stay calm. Calm arrives before the situation does. You stop asking how to overcome fear. Fear arrives too late to matter. This is the quiet shift that changes identity. You are no longer someone who reacts well. You are someone who is already there. Nothing needs to be forced. Nothing needs to be controlled. Only prepared. And the final question is not whether fear will appear again. It is this: what would your life look like if nothing ahead of you felt unknown anymore? Fear was never the enemy. Surprise was. The samurai did not become calm by mastering emotions. They became calm by removing the unknown. They arrived before the moment arrived. Anticipation was their true weapon. Not imagining success, not rehearsing confidence, but meeting every possible outcome early, quietly, without resistance. When nothing feels new, nothing feels threatening. The body stays present, the mind stays clear, action stays simple. This is the discipline most people overlook. They try to defeat fear when it appears. The samurai ensured it never had a reason to form. In modern life, the same principle holds. Fear grows where preparation is vague. Calm grows where familiarity is complete. You do not need to become fearless, you need to become unsurprised. When the path ahead is fully walked in advance, hesitation loses its voice. What remains is movement without drama, decisions without tension, presence without effort. The quiet truth is this: fear only controls what you have not yet faced. And once you stop waiting for fear to arrive, you realize it was never leading the way.